The Parker family, a much-loved and adventurous group of five, set off on their yearly vacation to the vibrant jungles of South America, sharing cheerful snapshots throughout their journey. Then, without any warning, they vanished. No messages, no updates, no trace for 5 long years. The mystery baffled everyone who knew them until one day Lily Parker, the youngest, reappeared alone, disheveled, and bearing a story so startling it would change everything we thought we knew about the Parkers. They were a family admired by all. David and Susan Parker, both in their mid-40s, were devoted parents with a passion for exploring the world. Their children, Jacob at 16, Emily at 12, and Lily at 8, grew up immersed in tales of their parents' travels. Every year, the Parkers embarked on a new adventure, and in 2018, they set their sights on South America to marvel at the untouched beauty of the Amazon rainforest. Their excitement was evident in the weeks before departure, with social media posts revealing glimpses of their preparations. David studying maps, Susan packing supplies, and the kids laughing as they tried on hiking shoes. The family planned to update everyone daily, sharing every detail of their adventure with friends and relatives back home. For the first few days, everything went as expected. They posted photos of vivid flowers, towering trees, and scenic boat rides on winding rivers, with captions full of wonder at nature unlike any they'd seen before. A post even featured Jacob standing next to a gigantic tree. Then, suddenly, the update stopped. At first, no one panicked. Poor internet and limited cell service were common in such remote areas. But as hours turned into days, concern grew. The Parkers had promised daily check-ins, and their silence was unlike them. By the end of the week, worried relatives contacted authorities to report them missing. A desperate search began as local teams combed the area where they were last seen. Helicopters flew overhead, scanning the dense canopy, and boats navigated the twisting rivers in hopes of finding a clue. The U.S. Embassy in Brazil joined forces with local officials to widen the search. Days turned into weeks, and hope faded as the vast jungle swallowed every lead. Their last known stop had been a small eco-lodge near a protected area's border. Witnesses recalled that the Parkers had left on a guided tour, but no one saw them return. Even the guide, a seasoned local, was nowhere to be found. As months stretched into years, the search eventually ended, with the jungle's relentless nature and no solid clues to follow. Investigators had to accept that the Parkers had likely fallen victim to the wild, joining the many unsolved mysteries of the Amazon. One ordinary morning at the American Embassy in Manaus, Brazil, 5 years after the disappearance, an officer received an unexpected call from a local official. A disheveled, malnourished girl had been found at a remote outpost near the jungle. She looked about 13, spoke broken English, and introduced herself as Lily Parker. The embassy staff were stunned. Lily, presumed dead along with her family, was alive, brought in with ragged clothes and a messy haircut. Her identity was quickly confirmed using old photos and records. Lily, the youngest of the Parkers, was the only one to reappear, and the questions about how she had survived were overwhelming. News of her return spread quickly, reaching relatives in the United States. Her cousin Clara and her grandfather George Parker boarded the next flight to Brazil. When they arrived, they barely recognized the girl before them. Lily was no longer the giggling 8-year-old they remembered. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow, and she moved as if expecting something unseen. Yet when she saw her grandfather, her expression softened and tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Grandpa." She rushed into his arms, clinging tightly as if afraid he might disappear too. Despite her halting speech, Lily managed to reveal fragments of her ordeal, mentioning strangers who had helped her and speaking vaguely about her family, saying things like, "They're still there, but sick, and at one point, I came for help." Her words sent shivers down George and Clara's spines. Could the rest of the Parker family still be alive? And if so, what condition were they in after all these years? That night, while Lily finally slept, George and Clara stayed awake, piecing together the scant details she had provided. The fragments of her story painted a picture of survival against incredible odds. Yet the missing details only raised more questions. At the break of dawn, as the sun barely peeked over the horizon, Lily, Clara, and George set off into the depths of the South American jungle. They left from a small riverside village, accompanied by a local guide carrying a machete. Lily led confidently, as though the dense, maze-like forest were a familiar path, while Clara and George struggled to keep pace in the heavy, humid air. Lily moved effortlessly through the thick foliage, as if she had traversed these hidden trails countless times before. Deeper in, they encountered signs of past human struggle, tattered bits of fabric hanging from branches and a rusty metal pot half buried in the underbrush. Clara picked up the pot, murmuring that it must have belonged to someone from their group, but Lily said nothing, focused on leading them forward without explaining where they were headed. As they continued, the forest grew darker. The canopy thickened until only small beams of sunlight pierced through, the air grew heavy, and the sounds of wildlife became more ominous. By nightfall, they found a clearing and set up camp. George tried to sleep, his mind racing with questions about how Lily had managed to survive alone for so long and what fate had befallen the rest of her family, while Clara was equally restless. At one point during the night, Lily suddenly got up and walked to the edge of the clearing. Clara followed her gaze and saw darkness stretching out beyond. In a hushed tone, Lily said, "We're close. They're waiting." With the first light of dawn filtering through the trees, Lily led Clara, George, and their guide further into the jungle along a narrow, winding trail. Abruptly, she stopped and pointed ahead, whispering, "There." Peering through the undergrowth, Clara and George saw a small village in a clearing. Simple huts made of woven leaves and wood arranged in a circle around a communal fire pit, with smoke curling lazily into the sky. It was a place frozen in time, untouched by modern life. As they entered, villagers emerged from their huts. Lily greeted them, using familiar gestures and words in a language that was only partly understood by Clara and George, who were amazed at her ease with the locals. At that moment, they saw the rest of the Parker family. It was as if time had stood still. David and Susan Parker sat outside one of the huts, nearly unrecognizable, thin and worn by hardship. Jacob and Emily were nearby, showing similar signs of frailty and exhaustion. The sight brought tears to George's eyes as he called out, "Susan, David." David looked up with wide eyes in disbelief as George croaked out, "George." Clara hurried to embrace both Jacob and Emily. The reunion was bittersweet, filled with joy yet marred by the stark reality of their condition. Meanwhile, Lily stood aside quietly, watching as the family came together again. Once the initial shock subsided, George and Clara began to absorb their surroundings. The village was small and remote, with people living off the land using remarkable resourcefulness. They cultivated small gardens, fished in nearby streams, and foraged for medicinal herbs. In broken English, Lily explained that the villagers had discovered the lost Parkers near death years ago and had taken them in, nursing them back to health. "They saved us," David said. "We wouldn't have survived without them." Still, it was clear that the family's health had worsened. George noticed David struggling to breathe, Susan coughing persistently, while Jacob and Emily looked pale and weak. Even the villagers showed signs of illness, with sunken eyes, labored movements, and rashes. "What's going on here?" Clara asked. Lily replied that a strange sickness had spread through the village months earlier, affecting everyone, including her family. The villagers had done their best using traditional remedies, but their isolation meant they had no access to modern medicine. "That's why I left," Lily said softly. "I had to find help." George's heart sank as he realized the situation was critical. The family needed immediate medical attention, yet the village's remote location posed a huge challenge. George and Clara discussed their options with the Parkers and the village elders, who were reluctant to expose their tight-knit community to outsiders. "We've been here for generations, hidden from the world, and we don't trust what we don't know," Susan explained. The conversation went on late into the evening, with Lily serving as a bridge between two very different worlds. Her fluency in the villagers' language and her close bond with their customs eventually won over the elders, who agreed to allow limited outside help. That night, as the fire crackled and the jungle noises grew louder, Lily sat with Clara and George near one of the huts while her family rested inside, too weak to join them. Gently, Clara urged Lily to share her story. "We got lost," Lily began simply. "Our guide took us on a new route, claiming it was shorter, but then a storm hit. The river swelled, and the jungle closed in around us. The guide panicked and led us deeper into the wild to find shelter. Days turned into weeks, our food ran out, and we lost all sense of time and direction. Our maps were useless in that relentless landscape. We were scared, but Mom and Dad kept saying we'd find a way out. Then, one night, the guide vanished. Whether he had abandoned them or fallen victim to the jungle, Lily never knew. Alone and desperate, the Parker family pressed on until they stumbled upon the village. They didn't speak our language, but they helped us, gave us food, water, and shelter," Lily said. Initially, the Parkers were wary of the tribe's intentions, but over time, they realized the villagers meant no harm. In fact, they had saved the family's lives. Forced to adapt, the Parkers learned the tribe's ways, fishing with nets woven from vines, foraging for edible plants, and using natural remedies to treat illnesses. "It wasn't easy," Lily admitted. "Dad hurt his leg, Mom got sick from the water at first, but we learned to survive." As the years went by, Lily's once fluent English faded as she picked up the tribe's language. Jacob and Emily became adept at climbing trees and catching fish, while David and Susan helped with farming and gathering firewood. Though they longed for home, the Parkers gradually accepted their new life, convinced that rescue was impossible until the sickness hit. Lily described how the illness swept through the village. Fever, coughing, and overwhelming fatigue struck even the strongest villagers, and the Parkers were not spared. Susan grew weaker by the day. Jacob and Emily struggled to stand, and David's breathing became labored. "I couldn't just watch them get worse," Lily said. "I knew I had to do something." Despite protests from the villagers, Lily made the difficult decision to leave and seek help. Over several weeks, she prepared by gathering supplies and memorizing the faint trails connecting the village to the outside world. "I didn't know if I'd make it, but I couldn't just stay and do nothing," she explained. As the firelight flickered in the village that night, Jacob quietly stepped out of his tent and approached Clara and George. He glanced at Lily, who gave him a subtle nod, then took a deep breath and murmured, "There's something Lily didn't mention." Pausing to collect his thoughts, he added, "The sickness isn't natural. It's coming from something in the water." While Lily was looking for help, she noticed signs of mining upstream. There were men, machines, and barrels of chemicals near the river. "They've been dumping waste into the water we drink and use every day." Lily then reached into her bag and produced a small object, a rusty metal tag with an unfamiliar logo. "I found this near the site," she said. "The river flows into the village, and it's poisoning everyone. Our family, the villagers, even the land." In the days following this shocking revelation, Clara and George acted fast. With the reluctant consent of the village elders, they contacted local authorities and international aid groups to secure immediate medical assistance for the remote community. Doctors arrived by helicopter, bringing vaccines, clean water, and medicines to fight the illness ravaging the village. George also led efforts to notify environmental watchdogs about the illegal mining operations. Photos of the rusty tag and the polluted river were sent to media outlets around the world, framing the situation as a harrowing tale of survival. The story quickly attracted international attention, drawing environmental activists, human rights groups, and journalists who descended on the region to expose the devastating effects of exploitation on vulnerable communities. In the end, Lily's courage and the Parker family's ordeal became more than just a survival story. They turned into a rallying cry, proving that even in the darkest moments, bravery and determination can light the way forward. Do you think you could survive deep in the Amazon like the Parkers did? Share your thoughts in the comments. For now, We're signing off. Catch you in the next video.